Hello, Pittsburgh Steelers fans. Welcome to another episode of Steelers Friday Night Six Pack. I am your host, as always, Tony Defio, and I thank you for joining me on this lovely Friday evening in Pittsburgh. The last Friday evening of August, I believe. Yeah, today's the 26th. So, yeah, the last Friday of August. That means we're almost there, a little over 2 weeks away from the start of the Steelers' 2022 regular season. But, of course, before they can do that, they have to play one more preseason game, which will determine a lot of things, including who will be on their 53-man roster when they head to Cincinnati on September 11th to take on the Bengals, the defending AFC champions. Before I get into anything about tonight's show, I just want to, as always, please, I ask you and encourage you to like and subscribe to our Behind the Steel Curtain YouTube channel. We bring you live shows each and every day and night. If you were tuning in a few hours earlier, you saw the Touchdown Under show with Maddie Pevrow and Mark Davison. They are the two chaps from Australia, from Down Under, and they always bring you great content. Of course, we have this show. We have the Here We Go Steelers show with Brian Anthony Davis, and he sometimes has a guest. We have Rerun the North with Kevin Tate and a few guests every week, and they talk about all things AFC North. We have The Hangover on Monday with Brian, Shannon White, and yours truly. On Tuesday, we have the Scobro show with Dave Schofield and Rich Schofield. Wednesday, we have Know Your Enemy with Shannon and Jeffrey Benedict. Thursday, we have the Steelers preview with Jeff Hartman, Dave, and Brian. Am I missing any shows? We have post-game stuff. If you're going to be tuning in this Sunday night after the Steelers take on the Lions at Acrisure Stadium, you'll have a nice post-game show to watch and to digest and to get your feelings out. And that's either going to be Jeff or it's going to be Kyle Kreis. I think that's how they're going to do it. Jeff and Dave and Brian, I think they'll be doing the earlier post-game show. So I guess they'll be on this week. But if it's a later night, if it's a prime time game, which the Steelers will have several this year, then you'll have Kyle and his friends hosting the post-game show. So please check those out. And you can catch all those live shows also live on Facebook. And if you're watching me on Facebook, you know that. And hello. And, of course, you can catch all those shows after the fact on any audio platform where you listen to podcasts. You can find our stuff. It's a growing community. It's a growing family. So please check that out. And, of course, check out our original audio stuff that you don't get live, but you can get it after we record it and publish it and edit it and publish it. And that's shows like Let's Ride with Jeff Hartman, The Steelers Fix with Jeremy Betts and Andrew Wilbar, The Stat Geek with Dave, From the Cutting Room Floor with Jeffrey, The War Room with Maddie. I think that's it. There's so many. Oh, yeah, of course, what Ian's talking about with Kyle Kreis. So all those shows and many more you can catch on any audio platform. I like iHeartRadio, but you can catch us on Spotify, Google, Apple. It doesn't matter. You'll find us. Check it out and check out Behind the Steel Curtain, their website. We bring you news, commentary, film breakdown. Anything Steelers related, anytime you need a Steeler fix, you can find it on Behind the Steel Curtain. It's your one-stop shop for all your Steelers needs. And let's check out the live chat, who we have with us tonight. Of course, we have Jared Double. He was number one, as he is quite often. First one in. Brad Jewett, Danny Owens Jr., who says, hey, Tony. And he also says he's ready for kickoff. Aren't we all, Danny? Aren't we all? Claude Bishop is with us, another regular. Just Me is making an appearance tonight. That's great to see. Welcome, Just Me. And she says, hey, Tony and family. And that's a good way to describe us. So, let's see, am I missing anybody? I have a pop-up on my screen right now, so I can't see everything. Pesky McAfee pop-up. Steelers Pittsburgh is with us. Steelers Freak. All right, we have a nice crew tonight. So, Let's start things off by talking about last Saturday's game in Jacksonville, TIAA, or is it TIAAF Field? By the way, if you're so annoyed by Acrisure Stadium, try having to say TIAA Creft Field or whatever they call that place in Jacksonville. Every time you open your mouth, it would get annoying after a while. But anyway, the Steelers beat the Jaguars 16-15 on a last, I guess, 2-minute touchdown. Not a last minute, but the last 2-minute touchdown from Mason Rudolph to Tyler Snead. And it was kind of an ugly game, your typical preseason game. It was alarming in many ways if you're a Steelers fan because Jacksonville really controlled things on both sides of the line of scrimmage. They, especially on the defensive side, I mean, they really got after the quarterbacks and stuffed the running backs. Pittsburgh only rushed for 24 yards, and I think less than 10 of those. I think 10 of those were by the running backs. I forget the stats. I looked at them last weekend. I don't think I need to see any more of that. But, yeah, it wasn't a great night in the trenches, especially for the offensive line. Kendrick Green looked lost again. Dan Moore didn't look so hot. Nobody really along the line, except for maybe Shooks Okorafor, looked like they were ready to start the regular season. So that was one alarming aspect. Again, I wasn't really that concerned about the defense. I think the defense did okay. Again, you're not really designing much, scheming much in the preseason. And plus, even though TJ Watt played a little bit and Ogunjobi played, you still didn't have Cam Hayward. You still didn't have Alex Highsmith. Minka Fitzpatrick didn't play. So, I mean, you still weren't playing with a full complement of starters. So, and aside from that, I mean, the defense really didn't look that bad. I mean, they gave up 97 yards on the ground on 30 carries. The time of possession was heavily in favor of Jacksonville, 34-21, but you can attribute a lot of that to the offensive deficiencies, I think. So I'm not that concerned about the defense. I still think it's going to be a good defense. It's going to get after the quarterback. The question still remains, can it do much better stopping the run than it did last year? And I think just as long as Alulu stays healthy and Ogunjobi stays healthy, and there aren't any unforeseen injuries to anybody else, serious injuries, I should say, long-term injuries, I think the running game or the run defense should be at least close to average this year, which would be a step up from last year. And again, I think they're going to be able to get after the quarterback because they haven't stopped doing that for over 5 years. So I'm not concerned about that. But the offensive line, it's still concerned. I'll get into that more later. Nobody really shined as far as skill position players in this game. There was some nice play here and there by some of the people like Pat Freiermuth and Benny Snell had a nice touchdown. But overall, it wasn't a great showing for the skill position players. But believe it or not, the quarterbacks all look pretty good again. Mitchell Trubisky, he didn't look that great, but he was under siege more than anybody else, and he did look like Houdini on 2 or 3 of the plays where he was running for his life, and he made some things happen when nothing was there. He made something out of nothing, so to speak. And then Kenny Pickett came in, and he looked great. I thought he completed 6 or 7 passes. The one incompletion was on a spike to stop the clock. 76 yards and a touchdown. He averaged 10.9 yards a pass attempt per pass attempt. So, I thought he showed a lot of poise, standing back there in the pocket, completing passes downfield, 15 yards downfield, a couple of occasions. Facing unblocked defenders. So I was impressed by that. Of course, Mason Rudolph looked pretty good too in the second half, and he led the comeback at the end, the game-winning touchdown at the end. So I was really pleased with the quarterback play. I think, as I mentioned last week, it's your first off season, your first training camp, your first preseason without Ben Roethlisberger, and you have 3 quarterbacks in there. You're not sure about any of them really, and they've all, I think, played pretty well. And I don't really think it's going to be anybody other than Mitch Trubisky to start in Cincinnati, but I think these quarterbacks have done well for themselves, and I think whoever winds up starting a game, I think all 3 of these guys might start this year, provided Rudolph sticks around. They might all wind up starting games this year, so I think the offense will be in decent enough hands, no matter who's the starting quarterback. Obviously, you want somebody to pull away from the other 2, preferably Pickett, because he's the future anyway. So you want to see him just once everything starts to click, you want to see him quickly surpass the other 2. But as of right now, I think they're all doing fairly well, and they all had good training camps, and they all have had good preseasons up until now. But there's one more game to play, and of course there are still a lot of questions that need to be answered. I think last Saturday's game gave them even more questions that need to be answered moving forward, namely the offensive line. I'll get into more of that later, but they still have to find 5 starters before the regular season starts. I'm pretty confident they have the majority of the starters there. The only question remains left guard. And I think that's Kevin Dotson's to lose right now. I think Kendrick Green has looked so helpless, really, these 2 preseason games. I don't see any way that he can improve between now and the regular season to the point that he should be the starting left guard. I think Kevin Dotson, when he's been in there during his short career, whenever he's been in the lineup, starting back in 2020, he's performed pretty well. So I don't know why they wanted to make this a competition, other than the fact that Kendrick Green was a 3rd-round pick last year, and he was clearly a failure at center. And they brought in Mason Cole to be the starter this year at center. So they needed to see if Green could play guard at the pro level. And they figured, since they apparently don't trust Kevin Dotson fully at this point, they figured they would create a competition at left guard. But I think Kevin Dotson needs to be the left guard, or right guard, as Shannon mentioned on Monday. If you want to move James Daniels over to left guard, that's fine. Whatever. I think those are your 2 best bets for guard heading into the regular season. Kendrick Green needs to focus on continuing to improve and just at this point try to be a quality backup. So as far as the quarterbacks, Mike Tomlin announced on Friday that Mitch Trubisky would start again for a 3rd straight week against the Lions, and then Pickett would come in after him. And I would assume, since Oladokin was cut, I would assume that Mason Rudolph is going to play the entire second half, or maybe Pickett plays some in the second half, and then Rudolph takes over and plays the rest of the way. But since Trubisky, I think people they've been reading a lot into this quote unquote quarterback race this week, because Pickett looked so good against the Jaguars, and because Trubisky struggled, a bit, mostly because of the pass rush and a lack of protection, and because there's no chance in Hades that Rudolph gets the job, because they're just not going to do that, even though he's looked really good and consistent since the start of training camp. He's not going to win the job. So this led to speculation. Last week's events led to speculation during the week that the starting spot was still open for quarterback. And of course, Tomlin fed into that by not committing to a depth chart, committing to a starting, or committing to a rotation in Sunday's game. But I think because the fact that Trubisky is going to start again, third week in a row, I think he's going to start in Cincinnati. I think if it was a true competition, at some point Pickett would have started one of these 3 preseason games, and then Trubisky would have came in after him, and it's not going to happen. So I think unless Trubisky just plays absolutely horribly, and I don't think he's going to be in there long enough to play horribly, to be honest, then I think he's going to start, which I'm okay with. I think Trubisky's a solid quarterback, and provided the issues get worked out with the offensive line somewhat, they'll be fine there. And I'm okay with that. And I'm okay with Pickett assuming the role of starter down the road sooner rather than later, obviously. But I think, others have pointed this out this week. I'm not the first to say this, but I think it would be a lot better if Pickett replaced Trubisky at some point during the regular season, as opposed to Pickett being named the starter for week 1 and then maybe struggling horribly and then having to be replaced by Trubisky. I think that would maybe affect his confidence, Pickett's confidence. He's a confident guy. He seems to be a natural leader, but you never know what can happen, how things can shake your confidence as a professional football player. And he's not playing any position; he's playing the most important one. So I think it'd be better if Trubisky starts and Pickett replaces him at some point. So I don't look at it as a competition. I never thought it was. After the first preseason game, I was convinced that it wasn't a competition, the way they used Trubisky and the way they used him again last week. And the fact that he's starting a third week in a row, I don't think he's in danger of losing the starting job unless something crazy happens before September 11th. So as far as some other roster battles, is James Pierre in danger of losing a roster spot? Justin Lane certainly is. In fact, I don't even know why he's still on the team. I mean, what has Justin Lane ever done as a professional cornerback? I mean, he's been pretty good on special teams, I guess, but as far as a cornerback, which is what he was drafted as in 2019, supposedly a bargain, a value pick in the third round. What has he done? And the answer is nothing. Zilch, zero, nada. So I think he's in danger. Inside linebacker, Marcus Allen, probably in danger. I think Buddy Johnson will be safe for another year. As far as safety, I mean, obviously, Kazee safe. Edmonds is safe. Norwood's safe. Of course, Norwood's everything. He plays everything, but he plays free safety. I think that's his position by trade right now in the NFL. But I think obviously he's safe because they like him a lot. I don't know. I mean, they have to make a lot of cuts. So clearly, there's more than just a few roster spots up for grabs. But people are going to be focusing on certain aspects like receiver and running back. But like I said last week, I'm not that concerned about who the backup is outside of Najee Harris. I think he's going to be the workhorse again in 2022. And whoever his backup is, they can name a second, third, fourth stringer, but really, it doesn't mean that there's going to be it's a linear thing, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. You know, they can put in whoever they want. If, for example, if Harris gets hurt, you know, the backup isn't automatically going to start the next game. They could go to the third stringer or the fourth stringer or whatever. So, and Harris is supposedly going to play this Sunday, which I think would be kind of a mistake because I don't think they need to put him in harm's way because he is going to be their bell cow running back in 2022. But if you listen to Mike Tomlin's press conference on Friday, the key word that he used when asked if Harris was going to play, he said, yes, he's scheduled to play. The key word is scheduled. Doesn't mean he's going to play. I'm sure he'll suit up and he'll put the pads on and everything. But I wouldn't be surprised if he sat this one out all 4 quarters. He just stood around with his shoulder pads on because he doesn't need to take that kind of punishment, even for 4 or 5 snaps. Same with TJ Watt. Same with Cam Hayward, Minka. None of these guys need to play. You know, people talk about the rust and continuity and chemistry. Okay, fine, but after Sunday's game, there's a 2-week break until the regular season. And as I've said before, wouldn't rust build up by week 1 anyway? I mean, so just keep your valuable players out and let the youngsters and the fringe players battle it out for those final roster spots. So that's how I feel about that's what I'm going to be looking at this Sunday. I mean, obviously, I'm interested to see what happens with the quarterbacks, but again, I don't anticipate it affecting who starts week 1. I think it's Trubisky's job in week 1. I think that's how they want it anyway. So let's talk about the hot topic of the week, and that's the offensive line. And, you know, there's no defending how they looked last Saturday because they didn't defend anybody. They didn't block anybody. At least they didn't do it well enough. And all 3 quarterbacks were running for their lives, and especially Trubisky. I mean, it was a shame because he was definitely playing the starters, the ones, and you know they just had no answer for Jacksonville's front 7. And you know Jacksonville does have a lot of young, talented pass rushers, so there's that. But you know, if you're the Steelers in your offensive line and you're trying to become a formidable unit, sooner or later you're going to have to stop. Hello, testing. Of course, I lost my my mic for a few seconds here, so I apologize. But anyway, back to the offensive line and how Pittsburgh has addressed it in recent drafts. And it's true that they have not drafted an O lineman in the first or second round since 2012 when they took David DeCastro in round 1 and Mike Adams in round 2. So it's been a long stretch. So, you know, the question is, well, why have they neglected it for so long? And they essentially did the same thing in the 2000s. You know, after they drafted Kendall Simmons in round 1 and 02, they didn't spend a first or a second round pick on an O lineman until 2010 when they drafted Marquise Pouncey. So the question is, why have they neglected it? But have they neglected it, or have they had other priorities? You know, if you look at when they started building that line, well, I guess they kind of accidentally started building it. You know, the line from the mid 2010s that was so highly decorated and so good. They kind of accidentally started building it when they signed Ramon Foster as an undrafted free agent out of Tennessee, and nobody knew it at the time, but he was going to be he would become a full-time starter at guard in 2011 and be a mainstay there for almost a decade. So it started there. And then, of course, in 2010, they drafted Pouncey in the first round. In 2011, they drafted Marcus Gilbert out of Florida in round 2. Of course, in 2012 with DeCastro and Adams, that was a failed experiment with him. But DeCastro in 2012. And also in that 2010 draft, they found Calvin Beachum in the 7th round, and he became a starter for them for a short period of time at tackle, but he was really effective before moving on as a free agent. So, that the rebuilding of that line, it didn't happen overnight. It was really bad in the late 2000s, and it remained kind of iffy for a number of years until 2013, 2014. Even late in 2013, it was still a train wreck, And so they put Calvin Beachum in there at left tackle, and then it kind of settled things down. And of course, in 2014, they hired Mike Munchak, and the line began to gel and to grow, and became one of the best in the NFL for 3 or 4 years. And during that time, Munchak helped develop guys like Al Villanueva, who became a decorated starter for them at left tackle. B.J. Finney, Chris Hubbard at right tackle, who had to fill in quite a bit for Marcus Gilbert when he was suspended or injured. Matt Filer was another one who was an undrafted free agent that could play guard or tackle and became a starter at both eventually. Did I mention B.J. Finney? He was a decent spot starter at center and guard. And you can attribute that to Munchak and his abilities to get the most out of his linemen. And of course, he turned people like Gilbert. I mean, Gilbert was he was a 2nd round pick, but he struggled early on. And after Munchak came along, Gilbert turned into one of the top right tackles in the NFL for 2 or 3 years, or he was really one of the best. And it was just a great unit, and they had a great thing going on. And we back then we would talk about how there just seemed to be so many linemen coming up through the pipeline, undrafted free agents and late round draft picks, and it was amazing. But we have to remember that line was also anchored by some high pedigree players, like Pouncey, DeCastro, and Gilbert. So there was a nice mix there of pedigreed players, undrafted free agents, and of course you had Munchak in there making it all work. So during that time, when this line was just really outperforming most other units in the NFL, was there a reason to focus on it in the draft? You go back to, like, for example, by 2013, they had spent so many draft picks on linemen that it was time to focus on other things, like, trying to find pass rushers again, because their pass rush was really anemic for a number of years prior to late 2016. So that's where you go out and you get guys like you draft Jarvis Jones in the first round. Of course, that was in 2013. 2014, they went out and drafted Ryan Shazier, because they needed another centerpiece of their defense. After, he played a different position. After Troy Polamalu retired, they needed somebody else to kind of be that dynamic playmaker in that defense. So they draft Ryan Shazier. In 2015, they go out and they draft Bud Dupree, because they were trying to continue to find outside linebacker help. 2016, they drafted Artie Burns, because they were in desperate need for cornerback help. Of course, 2017, TJ Watt. So you can keep going down the line. I mean, they had to focus on rebuilding that defense, because it got old all at once, and all the money and all the draft picks were on the offensive side of the ball, and they were doing a pretty darn good job. They had one of the best offenses in the NFL, so they had to concentrate on the defense by and large. So was it a mistake to not draft offensive linemen in the first or the second round or the third round during that time frame, or should they have concentrated their efforts on other parts of their team, which is what they did. So unfortunately for them, the line started to get old around 2019, 2020, and it started to deteriorate. But, and there really wasn't anything, in the pipeline to replenish that. Well, when you're talking about where you allocate your resources, your draft resources, you can't get everything all at once. I mean, you have to focus on certain areas, every draft. You can only do so much in each draft. And, if I may jump back to those 00 teams where they didn't focus on offensive linemen for many drafts. Well, if you look at who their linemen were, I mean, it was Marvell Smith, who was a really good player. Obviously, Simmons. Jeff Hardings was their center for many years. And of course, Alan Faneca is a Hall of Famer. And they had one of the better offensive lines in the NFL up through maybe 07. And then, those guys started to get old and injured. And of course, Faneca left as a free agent. Hardings retired. So it all happened at once. But, in the meantime, they're out there drafting Troy Polamalu in 03, Ben Roethlisberger in 04, Heath Miller in 05, Santonio Holmes in 06, Lawrence Timmons and Lamar Woodley in 07, right? So, these were all important players for them for their Super Bowl years. So, when you say, well, why didn't they focus on offensive linemen? Well, you have to remember, well, if they did that, then they wouldn't have had some of the players that they had on other positions. Same with the recent drafts. Like even this last one, 2022, there are people like Mark Madden saying, "Oh, I still say they should have drafted an offensive lineman instead of Pickett." I mean, are you kidding me? I mean, Pickett looks like it's only 2 games and, a lot can happen, but it looks like they may have found themselves at least a decent future starting NFL quarterback. I think he's going to be even better than that. Maybe Pro Bowl level. You know how hard those guys are to find. So you want to say they shouldn't have drafted Pickett and they should wait till next year and try to get somebody in that deeper quarterback class. And they should have focused on a lineman this year. But you have the guy now. You probably have the guy now. It looks like you might have the guy, the quarterback. So you have him. And you're still saying go after a lineman. You should have drafted an offensive lineman instead. That makes no sense. Some people are just so short-sighted when it comes to certain things. They don't want to see the big picture. And sometimes you have to look at the big picture when it comes to how a team is put together and what the future looks like. And believe me, you're going to want to have the quarterback over anything else right now. So the fact that they passed on whatever linemen were out there in favor of Kenny Pickett, if he turns out to be the player he looks like he might turn out to be, thank your lucky stars. They neglected the offensive line again. Okay. Even in 2021, well, Najee Harris, they should have drafted a lineman instead of him. Okay. Who? Name me somebody from that draft that was drafted after Harris that looks like he might be a better player at his position than Harris is at his. And you don't think running backs aren't important. They're a dime a dozen. Really? Then why draft any at all? Why not just let them all go to become undrafted free agents and sign them after the 7th round? If you can get a running back anywhere, why are some drafted in the 1st round, some in the 4th, some in the 6th, et cetera, et cetera? You don't think Le'Veon Bell was important for them? I mean, he was a first-team All-Pro running back for a half a decade. He was the centerpiece of their offense for that entire time. He was drafted in the 2nd round. You think if they would have just found somebody as an undrafted free agent, he could have done the things that Le'Veon Bell could do? No. Another one that people keep mentioning, and I guess I get this in a way, is they should have drafted Creed Humphrey at center in the second round in 2021 instead of Pat Freiermuth. Okay, but that's basically, if you say that, then you're saying that tight end isn't important, or it's not as important as center. But I think we've seen as fans over the last decade or so how important a tight end is for a team going on a Super Bowl run, because it seems like most good Super Bowl contending teams have superstar tight ends. Gronkowski, Kelsey, I can go on and on and on. So it looks to me like Freiermuth can be one of those kind of tight ends. You're saying that's not important, or it's not as important as the center. I guess that's your opinion, but when you're building a team like the Steelers are building, like I've heard so many people call Freiermuth a luxury pick, which I don't get, because contending teams make luxury picks. Teams that are searching for a complete roster, teams that are looking to build their roster from mediocre up to like a contender, there's no such thing as a luxury pick. You go and you find the best player available who fits a need in each round. Isn't that what we always say every spring before the draft? You got to go for the best player available. Okay, well, they found some pretty good players in Harris and Freiermuth, and yet people are saying they should have picked a lineman instead, an offensive lineman. Okay, who? These guys aren't interchangeable. Just because you pick a position doesn't mean he's going to be good. And to me, again, I think you have two future All-Pro superstars in Harris and Freiermuth. So, that brings us back to the offensive line. It's been, as I mentioned earlier, it took 5 years, really 5 good years to build that original line that consisted of DeCastro, Pouncey, all those guys, or the previous line, I should say. It's only been 2 off seasons for this current offensive line, and it's still a work in progress. I still like Dan Moore a lot at left tackle. I'm confident in Mason Cole. I'm confident that Daniels will get his act together. He's only played 2 preseason games for them so far. He started 48 games in the NFL. I mean, I think he's at least a solid veteran player who's still young. Of course, the core 4, I think, is there's still a chance that he can raise his game a little bit more. And of course, left guard, like I said, I think Dotson is the better choice over Green there. And I think once they figure that out, once they admit that, that'll make the line even better. So you got to give these guys time to play together. You got to give them time to figure things out. This whole this idea of going out and getting Eric Fisher, some journeyman lineman or whatever, make a trade Mason Rudolph for a lineman. Who are you going to get that's any good for Mason Rudolph? And I like Mason Rudolph, but he's a 5th-year backup quarterback who's going to be a free agent next year. What team's going to give up a valuable offensive lineman to get him? Nobody. That's who. So those are my thoughts on the offensive line. It's stuff I've been saying all week. They just have, you have to just, if you're them, you have to continue to take your lumps, and you can't be so short-sighted when you're talking about this roster. It's not always about the upcoming season. And I realize that they like to contend each and every year. They like to make the playoffs each and every year, but sometimes you have to look a little bit down the road, and you have to realize that, okay, we can't do everything all at once. So we have to make a decision in this draft that's going to maybe improve one position, but neglect another, and then we'll address things down the road if we have to in future drafts. The point is, they need to build their roster for the long haul, and I think that's what they're doing right now. And I just have one more thing to say, and that's want to say rest in peace to Lenny Dawson. I mean, I'm somebody who grew up on NFL films and it's, he was I mean, obviously I know him. He's a Hall of Fame football player, obviously drafted by the Steelers. They gave up on him like they did a lot of good players back before the 70s, and he wound up being a Hall of Fame quarterback for the Chiefs. He was such a big part of those early Super Bowl years for the NFL. The Chiefs were in Super Bowl 1 and 4. Of course, the Chiefs lost to the Packers the first time around, and then in Super Bowl 4 they beat the Vikings, and he's just such a huge part of NFL history. It's a huge part of the AFL, and helping that league go from a laughing stock, something that nobody took seriously, to a true rival of the NFL, and a rival that forced the NFL to merge with it. And here we are today. It's the greatest league in the United States. So, but I remember him more as a NFL Films guy. I mean, he was obviously he was part of so many NFL Films features, like countless over the last, or the previous 3 or 4 or 5 decades. He was a host of Inside the NFL for many years. I don't know if people noticed, but back when he was a player, kind of like Mark Malone, he would anchor the sports that night in Kansas City, and he would interview players at practice, like a training camp or something, in full uniform. And it's so funny watching players being interviewed back then compared to today. I mean, so many guys back in the 60s when Dawson did this were so shy, and they didn't know how to talk to the media. They weren't all that articulate necessarily. So it was funny how watching him interview his own teammates and how stiff they were on camera. But I guess like if he would have had a conversation with them off camera, they were probably perfectly fine. So if you ever go back and if you ever want to go check some stuff out, go check out Lenny Dawson doing broadcast work for the local affiliate in Kansas City. After practice, he would go, because players didn't make what they make today, so he would have to go shower, after practice, and then go do the sports report. So it was pretty cool to see, and of course he turned that into a nice career for himself after the fact, or after his playing days. So rest in peace to Lenny Dawson, and he was one of the best, one of the greats. And on that note, I will take some questions and comments to round out the show. Let's see, this one is from Gary Anderson. Maybe doesn't spell it right. He spells it differently. But Gary says from Facebook, the offensive line was so bad in the Jags game, it made the Jags D and pass rush look like the Steelers D of the 70s. Well, that's hard to argue with that, but there's no question they have to improve. What they're doing right now is not going to be acceptable for very long, but it is the reality of trying to rebuild something in a short period of time. It's not always going to look pretty. I mean, you're going to have growing pains. You might have to make changes individually with certain players. That's just the reality of it. Maybe Dan Moore isn't the long-term answer. Maybe Shooks isn't worthy of the contract he just signed, and he'll have to be replaced. Who knows? Maybe Dotson isn't cut out to be a full-time starter at guard. So we'll see. But again, it took 5 years the last time, and we're only in year 2 now. So you can expect at least another year or 2 before they truly get it right. All right. This is Claude Bishop, and he says, please cut number 24, that's Benny Snell football, and number 44, that's Derek Watt, a Watt brother. Well, I mean, it's possible that one of those guys gets the axe, but they are both really good special teams players. But especially when they're paying Watt, you would need more out of that out of him than just special teams. And besides that, there's a lot of young guys coming into the league every year that should be hungry enough to want to excel at special teams. So we'll see. But hopefully it's not in Watt's case anyway. This isn't a decision that's made based on nepotism and trying to please his his younger brother, TJ Watt. Randall Jordan says, hope to see some improvement from the offensive line. Yes, don't we all? The CUDA 70 says, this game will be very important for 11 players. That is all they need to let go. Yeah. It's going to be their Super Bowl. There's no question. But it's also going to be like a dress rehearsal for some of the starters. But again, I don't think many of the important players are going to play all that much, if at all. Another one from Gary Anderson, a long one. No reason to rush Pickett, but if he plays lights out versus Lions, it will be very difficult to not start him. Remember, he isn't the typical 20, 21-year-old rookie. He's a 4-year college starter, is 24 years old, and much more mature than the normal rookie. That's all true. Kind of like Najee Harris last year. He was 24 last year, I believe. If Trubisky plays week 1, that's fine as well. Gives Pickett time to watch regular season games and game film before he steps in. Either way, Pickett looks to be the QB1 for the next decade. Well, I certainly hope that last part is right. Now, as far as him playing lights out against the Lions and that winning him the job, we have to remember he's still coming in second. And I'm sure there might still be some ones in there when the Lions, on the Lions defense by that point. But let's remember, Trubisky started against the other team's quote-unquote ones for 3 weeks in a row. And Pickett's been in – he was in second. He'll be in second these last 2 games. In the first game, he came in third. So he has yet to go up against the he has yet to start a game. So to me, it just seems weird that somebody would win a competition without actually ever starting a game in the preseason. But, it's a completely different animal when you're talking about quarterback, though. So we'll see what happens. Steelers Pittsburgh says of the O-line, the quarterbacks better have their running shoes ready. Well, that's why it's good to have mobile quarterbacks in 2022. And even Mason Rudolph has some wheels compared to Big Ben for the last few years. Ken Boyle says of Chris Oladokun, I was sad to see him get cut without seeing him in preseason at all. Yeah, I mean, he was really up against it. If you think Mason Rudolph's up against it in terms of not having a chance to start, I mean, Oladokun had virtually little chance of even winning a roster spot. Coming in as a 7th round pick, the same spring that they signed Mitch Trubisky, and they drafted Kenny Pickett in the 1st round. So, yeah, Chris Oladokun, it was really, I mean, he really had no chance. But hopefully he catches on maybe on the practice squad. I can't talk. Or maybe he catches on with another team and has a nice little career for himself. You never know. Mark Andrew says, let Pickett develop. No need to rush him. Yeah, although, like I said, I don't think it'd be the worst thing in the world if he came in and started at some point during the regular season. That's not the end of the world. But I think the best way to learn in the NFL is, I think, by being out there, by getting reps. But if you have somebody on your roster in a Mitch Trubisky that you're comfortable with as a solid veteran quarterback, then you're right. There's no need to rush Pickett. At least not. Don't throw him out there right away. Let's see what you have in a team to start week 1. How's your line perform? Can it ever get its act together? What's your offense look like? Then maybe you can make decisions on whether or not you want to throw Pickett in there in 2022. This one from Brad Jewett. He says, if Kenny replaces Mitch at some point, that means we're not doing good. If Mitch is the starter, I hope he's the starter for the whole year. Well, that's a good point. But I think either way, no matter what happens this year with Trubisky and the team, you have to get Pickett in there by year 2. You invested a lot in him, and you have to see if he can be your QB1 for the next 10 years. Gary Anderson, I forgot about. Shannon will scold me for this, but I forgot about Mark Robinson. He's a nice young story, 7th round pick, or a nice underdog story, I should say. Mark Robinson, the 7th round pick out of Ole Miss, he was a walk-on at Georgia after being a running back for his first 3 years for 2 different schools. Then he transferred from both of those. He walked on at Ole Miss last year and won the starting job and did well for himself. And who knows, maybe we've just touched the surface with him. I think he's got the roster made, but we've been shocked before when it comes to linebackers on cutdown day. This one from Steelers Pittsburgh, a couple of preseason games and Pickett is the savior. Give him a few years to see if he is. I'm not saying he's the savior, Steelers Pittsburgh. I'm saying it looks like he might be pretty good. Savior and pretty good are 2 different things. He's looked poised. He's looked like he's comfortable in an NFL stadium. Now, granted, he's not going up against regular season defenses and scheming and stuff like that, but nobody's saying he's the savior. I don't think anybody's saying he's a savior, but I think it's natural to be excited about him even after just 2 games. Trust me, it's a whole lot better than him looking like a deer in headlights, which was the last thing you wanted to see from the number 1 draft pick. And this one from Just Me, who's signing off, and have a great weekend, Just Me, and enjoy the game on Sunday. Mason ain't going nowhere unless he does. Have a great weekend, folks. Go Steelers. Well, I personally, like I keep saying, I would not trade the guy. Why? Why trade him? Especially with this train wreck of an offensive line right now. Why limit yourself at quarterback when you could need every single one of these guys at some point in 2022? This one from Claude Bishop, Johnson, Claypool, Pickens, Austin, Boykin, Vaughn, and Gunner as the punt and kick returner. Sims to the practice squad, where another team can steal him from Pittsburgh. He's talking about the receiving core, and that's going to be a tough cut down for Mike Tomlin and company to make, because they certainly have a lot of talented receivers. And I think it's in the big picture. I think it's a testament to what we've been talking about and what so many experts and draft experts talk about every week, and that's or for the past few weeks, and that's how many good young receivers are coming into the league each and every year now. So, yeah, it's going to be a tough one. It'll be interesting to see what happens there. And I'll leave you with this one before I call it a night. This is from Darkstorm1, and he says, I just want one of the quarterbacks to ball out and become a franchise guy. Don't care who. That's a great attitude. If everybody had that attitude, there would be no debates online. So nobody's ever going to have that attitude. But ultimately, you're right. If they find a franchise guy out of this trio, whoever it may be, and that guy goes on to play 10 great years for them, that's really all that matters. All right, folks. This is me signing off. Until Monday on the Hangover. I hope you guys. I can't talk tonight. I'm really discombobulated, but have a great weekend. Enjoy the game, and I will see you on Monday on Hangover. Go